I'll move my laptop instead of here. Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello. This is the very last time you will hear me yelling hello at you at the start of a lecture. A very special thing has just happened. Guys, shh. So, hello, everybody. I'm sorry I've offended you that much. You're leaving. Welcome to our very last lecture. It's an exciting moment and a sad moment. So we've got some great things today. First of all, we have prizes and excitement happening now, and by now I mean not right now, but soon. And I totally have a convincing slide. Yeah, that's totally a slide. I'll do the full slide thing I do in the second half, but today we have the prizes for the Mandelbrot competition, which is going to be fantastic. We're going to run the AI tournament and have prizes for that, so even I don't know who's going to win yet. And we have the fantastic Richard Buckland to speak to you for a bit. He's probably the person I learned my teaching philosophies from, so if you enjoy my teaching, it's all Richard's fault, and if you hate my teaching, it's probably my fault for not learning the good things. So, yeah, Richard.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you. Oh, yeah, that's awesome. And, oh, can we use a dock camera too? Yeah. Can you read that? Hi, everyone. Well done for reaching the end of the course. And I guess for most of you, the end of your first year here. Who is at the end of your first year for? Who is on it? Yeah. Well done. Right, you made it. You've got the exams to go, and we'll talk a little bit about them in a sec. But I think that this lecture is a very special one. I'm really actually honoured that Andrew invited me to come and say a few words, because this is our... Are you guys coming late? Get out, get out, get out. I'm joking. It's probably, there's only a few moments, a few times in your life where you get to reflect about things a little bit. Life's a bit frantic. When you get to my age, it's go, 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 and deadlines and things to do, and you rush around doing stuff all day long, and there's not much time for thinking about stuff. And I remember when I was in primary school, I used to think about things quite a lot, wonder about the world, and wonder if there was a God, and wondered why rainbows were the shapes they were, and wondered what I'd be like when I'd be older, and wondered what sort of life I'd live, and wondered if I'd be a good person, and, you know, all these things you used to think about when you're young. It's less time to think about them when you're older, and I don't know, Andrew, you're now sort of straddling the two, aren't you? Do you have much time to reflect on things, or do you just react to life and deadlines? Deadline to deadline. I know. And it's good. It's good that we can work hard and respond to pressure and do all that sort of stuff. But I do think it's a little bit sad that we do lose this almost childhood thing of just taking a moment to pause and think. And I guess it's an adulthood thing of just having more duties and obligations on you. That those moments just fade away a little bit. So this, I think, the last lecture of a course at the end of your first year is a really nice time to just think about things a little bit. So we will just think about a few things, and then there'll be chocolate at the end. So bear with me. Now, I wanted to, there's several things I wanted to talk about. One is significance. Can you read that? Is it too hard to read? I think the trick to computing is the same as the trick to being an engineer, is the same as the trick to cybersecurity, which is my area, to being a good security engineer, is the same as probably the trick to actually just living a good life and being a good dad or a good mom, good husband, good son. I think the trick to just coping with life and at the end of it sort of being proud of what you've done is this word significant. It seems to me that in the rush of all the things that bombard us, an engineer is a person who can look through the chaos and see the one or two things that are the significant things. In the crowd and the rush, you go, that factor there, that's the factor I've got to worry about. And these 50 other things, they can wait. I think that's the art of being an engineer, finding the most important thing, because you never have time to deal with all the things. And I think it's the art of a good life, because I'm sure you know now there's a million demands on your time and a million pressures, and the secret is it's not going to change as you get older. You just get more and more demands and more pressures. There's never a magic time when it's all over. I always used to say to my girlfriend, oh, I'm so tired, I can't wait until blah, 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 when it'll all be over. And after a while, she just started laughing at me, and she said, you always say that, but it's never all over. And she's right. It never is all over. So the trick is working out what's most significant and doing a good job for that. So, significant. I want you to imagine just for a second that that we're doing a course and that I'm teaching you about how to teach. So you're not a computer scientist, you're someone learning how to teach. And I actually think it's quite a useful thing to learn how to teach. I actually think at university that everyone should teach at least once, should communicate, should have led a group, should have been in a group that failed, should have been a group member that was supportive, should have practiced giving a public talk, should have done some charity or volunteer or helping work. There's just a whole range of things you should tick off while you're at uni, a little bucket list of things to do, and one of them is teaching. So suppose, hypothetically, you're about to teach, and we're doing a little course about teaching, and I'm going to teach you something about teaching. Oh, there's a little clicker thing. Oh, thank you. So, is the noise a bit annoying as it moves around? Is it better now? This thing might click onto my pocket. So suppose we're doing a course, and you've just seen this graph. And I remember the first time I saw this graph when I was doing my first teaching course. Someone was teaching me. The graph looks like this. I can draw it the normal way around, can't I? It doesn't reflect. Has anyone ever seen this graph, this curve? Oh, no, I've drawn it wrong. Anyone seen this curve? It's a famous curve that all teachers know. Anyone want to have a guess? What's that? Memory? It's even worse from a teacher's point of view. If this is time, and this is attention, this is a lecture. And this has been repeated over and over again by instrumenting students, by filming and having all different measures of attention, tracking eyeballs, all sorts of things, attaching electrodes to people. So, looking at this curve and knowing that this is the curve of attention for a lecturer, and you're just about to start teaching, maybe you're teaching it. Oh, by the way, what's this? Yeah, that's the instant you say, last slide. Last slide now. A little burst of attention. So suppose you're a student of this course, this hypothetical course, and you're learning how to be a teacher, and you've just seen this graph. What are you thinking? Put all the good stuff in the first 20 seconds. So true. That's why Andrew and I stuff around at the beginning for 20 seconds or something like that. I like your answer, though, because your answer falls in a particular category, if I was just focusing on what's significant. The actual answer is not significant. It's the category of thinking you're doing. And you're thinking, how can I use this information to improve my teaching? And I think that's probably what makes an engineer an engineer. And I've found over the years when we do group work and teamwork and things like that, that when I've got a lot of students doing business in a team, and teamwork invariably fails the first few times you do it, I get a lot of grief, and they cluster around me and they argue a lot, and basically what they're trying to do is apportion blame and explain why they should get a higher mark than someone else, or someone else deserves to be punished, or so on and so on and so on. But when I get a whole lot of engineers gathered around me and we're doing teamwork and the team fails, the engineers are more interested in this question. What could I do differently next time? How could I have affected that? I think for me, that's sort of the summary of what engineering is. When there's a problem, as engineers, we go, woohoo, a problem. Now I've learned some more information. How can I use this information to make the world better, or my job better, or my problem better? And probably if you're in business, you think, woohoo, a problem. How am I going to shaft someone else with this problem? And I've got to say, I'm very sympathetic with the engineering point of view. I do love it very, very much. So yeah, I think thinking about this, a lot of people, when they looked at this, asked questions like, oh, why is this? And what are the underlying factors leading to this? And try and explain and understand the curve. But I think a true engineer, when they look at this, simply thinks, that's interesting information. How can I use that information to solve my problem more easily? So I remember when I saw the curve, I did wonder about what the factors were that led to the curve appearing, but I only wondered about that insofar as it would then help me change how I taught, knowing those factors. And you might think of ways of teaching allowing for this curve. After I saw this curve that night, I went home and I thought of about 10 different ideas that you could apply to overcome the curve. I'll tell you one of them now. It's my favorite one. You've probably thought of it already. On every slide, say, last slide. And then you get this sort of shape. Perhaps. So why are we talking about this? What's the point of thinking about this in this hypothetical course we're doing where you're learning how to be teachers? I think a good teacher is someone who looks at this data and uses it to improve their teaching. So now we've reached the end of that course, the teaching course, and there's an exam because all courses have an exam. What questions am I going to put in the exam? Think about it. How could you test people on this curve in the exam? You know the sorts of questions that would probably be in the exam? Here's the curve. What's it called? Here's the name of the curve. Draw it. Here's the curve with a mistake. Can you fix it up? In what year was this curve invented? What's the name of the person that first noticed this? Tell me a problem with the research they did in this curve. Name 3 areas where this curve has been applied at universities around the world. Questions like that are very easy to ask in an exam. They have factual answers, and you can answer that. But none of the answers to that question tell me, your assessor, anything about you as a teacher. Those questions are really just a waste of time. I don't care if you know who invented the curve, or how to draw it, or what its name is, or anything like that. Any of the things I can measure actually tell me nothing. And the weird thing is, that's true in computing too. And the other weird thing is I think it's true in everything. But let's talk about computing. In computing, what can we test in an exam? Years ago, I was the person on the committee that wrote the exam for the HSC. And I was writing it for an HSC computing course that doesn't exist anymore. And I was so excited when I went in, oh, we're going to make the exam so good. And I sat down and one of the guys on the committee said, all right, so here's our sample exam. What do you think of that? And I looked at it and said, oh, this is horrible. And he said, I said, what about this question? It's asking, what's the definition of ASCII? What does ASCII stand for? ASCII. And he said, yeah, it's the American Standard Code for Information Interchange. That means ASCII. And I said, yeah, no, I know that. I wasn't asking you really. What I was asking is, why are we asking them this? Because just because they know the name of ASCII and what it stands for, that doesn't tell me anything about them as a person. And Richard Feynman, do you know Richard Feynman, the famous physicist? He said the same thing, but far more eloquently. He tells a story, and you can find it on the internet and on YouTube and things. He's an amazing man. You should find out everything about him. He tells this story reminiscing about his dad. And he said he went for a walk in the forest with his dad, and his dad just showed him stuff in the forest. And when he went back home, the mum proudly said, oh, my husband took my son into the forest. So all the other dads took all their sons into the forest because they were pressured by their wives or whatever. And then he said at the school the next day, or one day, a kid came up to him and he saw a bird that had just come out of the forest. And the kid said, what's that bird called? And Richard Feynman said, I don't know what the bird's called. And he said, ha, your dad's useless. My dad taught me the names of all the birds. That's a brown-throated thrush. And Richard Feynman, in the anecdote, he says, what I couldn't express to the other student, my friend that was saying this, is your dad taught you the name of the bird. That doesn't tell you anything about the bird. It might tell you something about how we name things. It might tell you something about the namer. It might tell you something about the English language. But there's no fundamental property of the bird. And he said, I could have told him that in Italian the bird was called a Tezuel al fuego, and in Spanish it's a Clor Senorita, and in all the other languages I know, it's a Bligil Bilha. He said, I could say all the names that have ever been given to this bird in its whole thing, and still at the end of the day you would know nothing about the bird. And I think education is like this. When we train you and educate you and work with you and help you, we're really hoping to change you from one sort of a person to another. And at the end of your degree, we want you to be a different person with different skills and powers and so on and so on and so on. Specifically in computing, we want you to be able to think like a computer scientist, which is a particular way, think like a programmer, a particular way of thinking. We want you to have a love of good workmanship and craftsmanship and have pride in the programs you write. And we want you to write beautiful programs, which is hard to articulate. We want you to think like a scientist and be analytical and skeptical and evidence-driven and always doubting and always testing and always seeking to prove yourself wrong. And we want you to think like a designer, someone who sees a problem and works out a solution, but not just a solution that works, but the best solution, a solution that best fits the problem. Like an architect won't just design a box with a bed in it for a house. They'll design a house that meets your needs and makes you happy and lifts your soul. That's the difference between a house designed by an architect and a house designed by me. That there's this qualitative element. But, you know, if we had an exam and all that sort of stuff, I can't test you on any of that, and the uni can't test you on that. We can test you a little bit. We can check you can debug a program. We can check you can, I don't know, you know what a buffer overflow is, and you know a bit of syntax, and you can make a loop work and all that sort of stuff. But somehow we're missing the whole point. That's not telling me if you're a creative thinker, if you're a problem solver, if when you get stuck you're going to keep working until you get it, that you help and lift your friends up when they have problems, that you collaborate and brainstorm, that you're inspired, that like many of our former students, you're a creative person and you're going to be an entrepreneur and do a startup. You're going to be like Adam Shook, who I always talk about because I'm so proud of him, that did Google Street View. He sort of invented it and wrote it and things. And he says, every time I write code now, tens of millions of people around the world use it the next day. Our students have done so many amazing. Some of my former students are now billionaires. So how could I have tested any of those things when they were at uni? I couldn't. I can just test if you know what ASCII stands for, or you can write a little program with you. And that's not trivial. It's not a waste of time. But I guess what I'm trying to talk about in this little moment of reflection is, I don't want you to think that the exam measures who you are, and I don't want you to think that the mark you get in this course measures who you are. And if you couldn't program when you came into this course, and you've worked really hard, and you've got a little flame inside you now, and you can program, I'm bursting with pride, and I don't care if you get 50 or 51, that's fantastic, I'm so proud of you. And if you could already program when you came into this course, and you get 99 in the course, but you haven't learnt anything, and you haven't challenged yourself, and you've just been dismissive of all the stuff, and you haven't sought to extend or alter or change in any way, and you've just been smug and complained and the sorts of obnoxious things I used to do when I went to uni, then, you know, that's a disappointment. You've sort of missed an opportunity, and I'm disappointed for you. And you might get 99, but you've sort of lost. You know, you've really done the wrong thing. You've got this opportunity to change yourself while you're here, and you haven't seized it with both hands hungrily. So I just want you to know, I know you're going into the exams. I know the exams are stressful. It's just the nature of university, and I apologize for it. But know this, that at the end of your degree, all that will count is who you are, the person you've become, and the skills you've got. And when you go to a decent employer, they're not going to care about your grades at all. A decent employer is going to sit you in a room and say, here's a problem. How would you solve this problem? And they're going to look at you really close. Andrew, you've done some Google interviews, haven't you? How did they go? Did they ask you your marks, or what happened? What did they do? Yeah. So if you couldn't hear that, they don't ask you about your marks. They sit you in a room and they give you a problem to solve. They watch how you solve the problem. They don't necessarily care about the actual solution to the problem. They're really interested in the process you follow. In other words, if I could paraphrase it, they're sort of interested in the person you are and the skills you have. The actual answer is not important. I know in first year there's many times we give you a problem and you say, oh, I could solve it this way. We go, yes, you could, but we want you to try and solve it this way. And you go, yeah, but I could solve it this way. You know, it'd take less lines. And we go, yeah, you know, newsflash, we already know how to solve this problem. We're not sitting here hungering for your solution. It's not like going to help us when you solve it. We don't really care about the solution to this problem. What we care about is how you can solve the problem. We care that if you've got a problem with constraints, that you can solve it. And if you just complain about the constraints, well, sure, yeah. I mean, yeah, the constraints are artificial. We've given you artificial constraints because we want to see how you can solve a problem with constraints. So I know we don't really articulate that very well, but, or maybe Andrew has, actually, because Andrew, you're a sort of, no, yeah. Hopeless. Oh, I knew it from the day I met him. Hopeless, hopeless, hopeless. No, not really. The day after. So I guess, anyway, the summary is we've made you do lots of things, we've made you suffer, we've made you work hard. Along the way, you've learned a whole lot of stuff. The reason we've done all the things we've done is we want to stretch you, we want you to challenge yourself, to face obstacles and overcome them, to feel that pride of workmanship and creativity and things like that. I hope we've managed to pull it off. I hope you're now going to do computing in the future, if it's your thing, and we will do anything we can to help you in your remaining 2.5 years here, or 3, or however long you've got here. And I think that's, I'm just very proud of you. I wish I could be learning it again for the first time. There is something exhilarating about facing it and overcoming it. And last time I spoke at a last lecture for a course, I showed a video. I didn't bring it this time, but it was just, do you even remember it, Andrew, was it? Did I show the one of Jackson Delahunt? Yeah. So a former student from here who went to Skeggs Redlands. I don't know if anyone here is from Redlands at all, but a former student, yeah, Redlands, or just a stretch, plays guitar, plays this amazing guitar, and he once shyly showed me a video of him playing something called Canon Rock. I don't know if anyone knows Matt Ratch, who's an awesome guitarist. So Jackson, when he was very young, 15 or 16, played a version of Canon Rock. Canon Rock. And it's just amazing to watch him play it. And he plays it at school. It's at a school night. The video's grainy. And he's just standing there going, and it's just going fantastic. And then he goes, thing, and there's this moment, and I freeze frame it at that moment. He's sort of going, and he's just standing in a spotlight, and he's arching his body, and his face is contorted, and his hands are like this. And it just looks like he is in sort of a bliss, like in another state. And I freeze it on that frame, and I say, you're going to think this is silly, but that's how I feel when I program. It's this, we can do anything, we can make things, it's exhilarating. So I guess, I hope you've had a taste of that pleasure, that you've had some moments of joy in all the moments of pain, and it's those moments of joy that keep us doing computing. And I actually, years ago, I had this idea, but I never did it, but I mentioned it and someone in the class did it. I said, you know what would be really interesting is when you sit down to write a program like an assignment, a big hard assignment, if you put a camera on your face as you're doing it, and you just keep the camera on your face the whole time you write the program, I reckon it would look like this. You go, it'd be all these moments of sadness with occasional and then and someone did that and played it really fast, and it was actually beautiful and did exactly that. You look pained most of the time, but there are these moments of joy, sheer joy. And I sort of think the art of being a computer programmer isn't knowing stuff, certainly not knowing what ASCII stands for. It's not knowing stuff. The art of being a programmer, I think, is the art of not being dissuaded and not giving up. So when you're in those moments of despair and nothing's working, because nothing ever does work, I think the really good programmers are sort of just the ones that go a little bit zen, and they just mellow, and they're almost in a meditative state, and they go, that's not working. Everything's stuffed. That's interesting. And they just keep going, and they don't... I actually think the art of programming is an art of self-mastery. and they don't give up. They somehow, and if you do give up, if you get so tense it's not working, then you go for a walk or you have a shower and then you come back. You don't give up. And I'm sure you've done this and you've felt like crying sometimes because the damn thing wasn't working. But if you felt like crying or giving up and then you've come back and tried again, that's it. You've got it. You're going to be a programmer. It might take one day, a week, a year. You've solved the hard part of being a programmer. And those moments of elation come faster and faster. For the rest of your life, sure, you have the things where nothing works because we're building something complex, and complexity is hard. And our minds aren't really good enough for the problem. And that's why it's so fun to do. If it was easy, it wouldn't be fun. And so our first attempt is never right. But if we just relax and go all zen and go, aha, ha, 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 then occasionally there are all those moments of joy. Now, I wanted to say, how am I going for time? I had a couple of... I've got 20 minutes. All right. And we need to talk about ethics and professionalism a little bit. And I also want to talk about Blade Runner. So do you mind if I just start talking about Blade Runner first? It is tangentially relevant. So you know the film, you may know, there is a film called Blade Runner that came out a long time ago that was quite a beautiful film. And you may also know, in the way of the world that I don't really understand in this society we live now where we tend not to want to make new things but just reinvent old things, there's a sequel to Blade Runner. And I saw it the other night. And I won't spoil it, except to say that... I'm going to spoil it all. And it was beautiful in so many ways, and it was a lovely film, and it created a lovely world, and it had lots of the aesthetic of the original. It was just really lovely. But ultimately, I was still a little bit disappointed when I left. And I was talking about it with my wife, who I'd seen it with, and we, on our first date, had seen the director's cut of Blade Runner. So it's a very special film to us. And she said, it's funny because it had the aesthetic of the original, and it had the sort of shape of the original, and the plot arc was very similar to the original, and the characters and the roles were very similar, but replayed in a different skin sort of thing, but very similar. But somehow it didn't have the magic of the original somehow. Maybe it was too much designed by a committee or something. It was still good. It's a great film. You're going to love it. It's good to see. But it has this... Who's seen it? What do you think of what I'm saying? No, it wasn't intended to have that. So you liked it as much as the original? You liked it more than the original? Ah, hey, that's perfect. So what we're seeing here is this really interesting thing. So just, if you don't know the premise of the film Blade Runner, it is the original film. There are these robots out in the world, androids, and they look like humans. Or replicants, they're called. And if you look at one, you sort of can't tell that it's a robot or a person. And interestingly enough, when you talk to them, you sort of can't tell either. And this was, I guess, what Turing was, you know, Turing, sort of complete hero, Alan Turing. He did a couple of amazing things in his life. In fact, he did 3. I don't know anyone else amazing who did 3 amazing things, except maybe Feynman. Actually, Feynman did 3 amazing things. Wow, he's like Turing. Feynman got a Nobel Prize for one of them. He was ripped off for another. You know, he invented quantum computing in a talk in Japan. He gave this talk in Japan, and they asked, what do you think the limits of computing are? And he said, oh, that's interesting. And he thought about it for a day or two, and then he stood up and gave a talk where he predicted quantum computing. He not only predicted quantum computing, he predicted the techniques they'd use, the physical problems they'd have, the challenges, the way they'd program it. Just in this little casual talk he had. He gave this talk in Japan, and everyone said, oh, that's a nice idea. And now, you know, however many years later, 50, suddenly we've got quantum computing. Amazing man. He should have got the Nobel Prize for that. But anyway, Turing, I guess, is famous now for his work in breaking the Enigma code and the impact he had on the Second World War. But to computer scientists, that's pretty trivial. We're not so amazed by that, though it's a lovely human interest story. He did some things that make him an intellectual giant. He came up with the notion of something called the Turing machine, which I don't know if anyone's heard about, and that's not the thing I'm going to talk about now. And that's an amazing idea. It sort of showed essentially that all computers were the same, and the computer you've got, and the computer I've got, and the computer I had 40 years ago, and the computer you're going to have in 50 years' time, unless it's a quantum computer, perhaps, they're all the same. you change all the bells and whistles, but deep down, fully abstracted away, in some fundamental sense, all the different computers are the same. They might have more memory or more speed, but other than that, they're the same. And why that's a profound result is if you can show something's impossible on one of these computers, then you've shown it's impossible on all computers. And he did that. He constructed this machine that was equivalent, an abstract machine that was equivalent to all modern computers. We haven't surpassed it at all, except possibly with parallel computation. That's a little bit unclear as to whether it breaks it or not. It's still open, the research on that. But it looks at the moment as though all computers are exactly identical, but different speeds. And he showed on his toy imaginary virtual computer that there was a problem you couldn't solve. And that gave rise to a whole class of problems you couldn't solve. And suddenly that result meant you couldn't solve them on any computer. They were problems that were unsolvable problems. And they weren't just difficult to solve or take too long to solve. We call that intractable. They were impossible to solve. In fact, years ago when I was teaching an algorithms class, I did want to set one of those problems and not tell the students. Because I'd explained the famous problem to them and how you generate other problems that are equivalent. And I thought a lovely way of testing people's understanding would be I would set as the main assignment an assignment to do something, and it would actually be impossible to do. Because you can come up with problems that sound like you should be able to do them, but they're impossible to do. I can't remember what it was. It was a really simple assignment. You had to think. You got given some machine code and you had to work out if the program would print out a 2 or not, or something like that. You had to write, that's right, you had to write a program. I haven't got exactly right. We taught them some simple machine code, like only a small number of instructions, maybe 10. And we said, write a program that takes a program written in machine code and works out if it'll print out the number 2 or not at any point in its life. And you would think, well, that's not hard to work out. You can compute all the paths through the program. You can find all the print instructions. You can work out what they print. No, it's impossible. Can't do it. Can't be done. I didn't set that as an assignment. But gee, that would be funny, wouldn't it? Would have been funny for me. But the thing that Turing did that was quite amazing was he came up with this notion of the Turing test. And to me, that's the most profound thing not just that he did, but that I can think of someone doing. Because he's a mathematician and a complete geek, and yet the Turing test is the most unmathematical test you can imagine. Yet I think it's profoundly true. And the Turing test is this. He was wondering, again, ahead of his time, how will we ever know if a computer is self-aware, if it's intelligent, if it's sentient or not, if a computer is like a person in some way? Really, I guess what he's asking is, would it be a crime to turn it off? If I turn off my computer now, I'm just turning off my computer. But if my computer's alive and it's a sentient thing and turning it off, that sentience is lost, that's committing murder. So really Turing was wondering the question, will we ever get to a point where we're creating complexity that's complex enough to mimic life and intelligent thought? And were we able to reach that point, how would we know? How could we test if something was intelligent or not? And he came up with this test called the Turing test. And it's the most beautiful and true test ever. And the first time I heard the test, I thought, no, this test is rubbish. It's not a good test. And the test is, who knows the Turing test? Probably a lot of you know it. Tell us what the test is. Can I paraphrase that? But that's really good. If it's impossible to tell the computer apart from a human being, then it is. If you can't tell the computer apart from something that's intelligent, then it's intelligent, is a paraphrase of the test. Not by its physical appearance. So he constructed the test so you're looking at a screen and you're communicating with either a human in one room and a computer in the other room, and they're both communicating to you with typing on a screen. So you can't physically see who they are, and you can ask them questions and they respond, and you can have chats with them. And at the end of the day, if you can't work out which one's a human and which one's a computer, he said, well, that means it's intelligent. And of course, I was outraged, because I thought, no, he's missing the whole point. I mean, it might appear to be intelligent, but it's not intelligent. There's a big difference between appearing to be something and not appearing to be something. But the more I thought about it as I got older, the more I realized, oh no, actually there's a really profound truth in that. If something is indistinguishable from something else, to all tests you can apply, then it really, who's to say it's different from that thing? So there's 2 points of view on this. One is called the intentional point of view, which is everything has a rich inner life that's true. And then there's something called the extensional point of view, which is all that matters for something is how it appears. For me, the universe is just data I'm getting through my senses, and it appears to be this. Who knows what it really is? That doesn't matter. It's what it appears. And the Turing test was really just saying the extensional point of view. He was just saying things are just what they appear to be. That's all there is to life. That's all there is to meaning. And at first I thought that was horrible, but later on I thought that was profound. And why computer scientists find that particularly profound is that sort of what drives all modern computing. When you write a function, all you care about is the behavior of the function. How it's actually implemented isn't important. So we say we have an extensional view of functions. This is what abstraction is. So when you write your programs and do your things, you only care about how they interact with other things, their interfaces or their APIs, as we sometimes call them. That's a really important design principle. Anyway, why am I saying all this? Because there I was walking out going to my wife, this film looks just like the original Blade Runner. You see. Yeah, I contradict myself. So that was quite lovely. All right, and the last thing I had to say, and then there'll be just like 5 minutes on ethics and we're done, is, again, just playing with this thing. By the way, I hope you're noticing I'm really saying the same thing over and over again, although it looks like I'm talking about different things. Why are we here? What are we doing? Does it matter how you change inside, or does it just matter how we can test you at university and how your marks on a test are? It's the same dilemma we're always faced with. And last night I was at one of the security courses and the students were presenting their projects. And one student presented this most amazing thing. It was, there'd been a hard drive, a network hard drive, which had failed. And he was trying to work out how to revive it or get the data off it. So he unplugged it and connected it up to various, was able to analyze it using a bit of software, plugging it into another machine. And found that as far as all the software was concerned, it was a corrupted drive. And it was just saying, you can't get any of the data off this drive, it's gibberish, it's rubbish. And yet, by poking around on the drive, he was able to see, by looking at the bits and bytes stored on the drive, there appeared to be files and data on the drive. But all the tools were saying there was nothing on the drive. And his presentation was not like anyone else's presentation. All he did was he spent the entire presentation telling us a sequence of steps he went through to get the data back off the drive. And he had chats that he'd been making with friends around the world, I assume, as he was trying to do it, so we could actually log the whole progress through the chats. And it was quite inspirational because it looked like it was hopeless. You know that sinking feeling, my drive's corrupted, I can't get anything, you feel all depressed. But he went, oh, yeah, oh, everything's stuffed. But he didn't get all stressed. And then he thought, I wonder why it's stuffed. And he did all these various tests and he found that he got some open source software to analyze the drive and it said the drive was stuffed. And did he give up? He went, oh, no. Oh, that's really interesting, everything's stuffed. And then he said, what's the actual error message it's giving me when it says everything's stuffed? And it was a message that implied there was some weird old version of the software running. And then he did some independent checks and found that old version of the software wasn't very likely to be running on this hard drive because that had stopped being made a decade before this hard drive was built. And then suddenly he had this flash and he thought, oh, the software thinks this drive is corrupted and it thinks it's running an old version of the sort of firmware or an old format of the data structure. And it can't be. So the software is confused. How could the software be confused? So then he decompiled, or he found the source code for the open source tools and found the series of conditions it would go through to say the drive is stuffed and give this particular error message. And it did it by consulting various sectors on the drive and from that working out what version of the software was running and so on and so on. And then he checked those sectors himself manually and found that those sectors had been corrupted. Just the sectors on the drive that described how the drive was set up and what software it was running, essentially, were corrupted. So he wrote the correct values into those, and suddenly he could get all the data back off the drive. It was quite brilliant. And I think I would have, as soon as I'd found there was data on the drive, just use other tools and start ripping all the data off the drive myself and reconstructing it later on. And that would have taken hours, and I would have lost file names and metadata. But just by being patient and systematic, being really a true CSE student, he managed to solve this problem by being patient. So I don't know that I could have ever tested him in any exam to find out he was able to solve problems in that way. But I hope you'll all be able to solve problems like that as you go on. There's something incredible to that about me. I was very moved last night to see that. We'll never measure that in a test, and he'll probably fail that course because he doesn't know how to spell ASCII or something like that. But somehow the real victory is how he's gone. He won't really fail the course. So I want to talk about ethics and professionalism. And why do we talk about ethics and professionalism at the end? Because they're tricky things to talk about, and they don't really relate to the things, the technical problems that you've been faced with. And as you get depressed when your programs don't work and frustrated and you have to do your assignments and meet your deadlines and all that sort of stuff, the last thing you want to think about, I think, is big picture things like ethics and professionalism. I reckon you just want to think about how to solve this problem, how to move on, how do I get the marks, how do I get this pain out of my life. But we do have this little moment of pause now, so we're just going to talk about it briefly. So what do we mean by ethics? Ethics, for me, is nothing to do with religion or anything like that. Ethics, for me, is being able to look at yourself in the mirror and feel proud. Ethics, for me, is I want my children, when they think about me, I want to be the sort of person that they admire. A couple of years ago, actually, I had this really bad cancer, and I thought I was going to die 1 week. And I had to go to this remote location because I was radioactive and didn't get any spidey powers at all. But I had to go away from people, and the latest results on the test, the scan before I went, seemed to show that it was everywhere, and I was, I didn't have long. And so I had this really weird week by myself away in the wilderness, thinking I might not have many weeks of life left. Well, I was sure I didn't. And I was a bit sad at first, and then I thought about it, and I thought back over my life, and then suddenly I was really happy, because I thought, oh, look, I made all those choices, and they seemed like dumb choices at the time, and they meant I didn't get to be rich, and I didn't get to do this, and I didn't. But I don't know, I just suddenly thought, I wouldn't change any of that. I'm really proud of those decisions I made. And sure, I've made lots of mistakes and things, but I just felt really quite content. And I realized that because I like teaching and helping people, I think that's the right thing to have done. I'm really proud I had that life. And I like looking after my family, and I love my kids, and I've given up a lot to do that, and I think that was the right call. And there were a couple of times I could have been dishonest and tricked someone and made some money. And there were a couple of times I was kind to someone and lost out a lot because I did that. And I just thought over all those things, and I thought, I'm really proud. I'm not proud, but I felt very happy and content. And then miraculously I came back and everything was all right. So I sort of think the test of ethics, and there were many things I regretted. I'm not saying there's all the bad things I did that I was ashamed of. But I think really the test of ethics is exactly that when you don't have to impress anyone else. It's just you are the test here. I think you want to live the sort of life that when you look back over it, perhaps at the end of your life, you think, yeah, okay, all right, I wouldn't do anything differently. So why are we talking about ethics in a computing course? Because you're going to grow up and go into the workforce, and you'll be faced with constant series of ethical dilemmas. And we can't examine you on that. Life examines you on that. And I actually can't tell you the answer to the ethical dilemmas, and I'm not wise enough to know them. But I can give you a framework for thinking about them that you might find helpful. So I have 3 observations to make. The first is, the first observation is we human beings we're not very good at making decisions under stress. In fact, we're lousy at it. And we see this all the time in security. People responding to incidents and crises more or less invariably make the wrong decision. And you'll see that if you do the security course with me, we actually give you scenarios each week where you're in a sudden crisis situation, you have to work out how to act to deal with this emergency or crisis. And it's very rare at first that students are able to deal with it because our emotions rise up and our self-interest rise up, and the more base parts of our characters are sort of more at the front. And somehow to control and to be ethical and wise, it takes a lot of energy, so if you're tired or hungry. Anyway, so humans just tend not to make good decisions under stress. So my first piece of advice is you should anticipate When you go into a job, you should think, oh, what are the conundrums I might face in this job? What are the challenges that might happen? What are the problems that might appear in my professional life? And then you should think about them in advance. Because if you think about them in advance, you're more likely to stick to it. And I've had students come up to me in tears who have been working for many years, just saying they were in a tricky situation and they'd done this or that, and now they're really ashamed. They did what their boss wanted them to do, or they didn't speak up when they should have, or they did this. And now they're really ashamed and wish they could have that time again. I don't want that to happen to any of you. So my first piece of advice is just think about things in advance and make plans. That's going to help you. And I thought of a good example of that. Oh yeah, when I'm driving along the road and there's a lot of trees about in the wilderness a bit, sometimes there's a chance that an animal could be on the road when you come around a corner and you're travelling at high speed. And I was in Tasmania once going down a very steep mountain and there was very poor visibility and lots of trees and lots of wild animals about. And I did the run through in my vans thinking, what will happen, what can happen, what are the issues, what are the risks? I just like do this little checklist because I'm so boring. And I thought, oh, an animal might come onto the road. And if it does, unless I can steer quickly and safely and there's good visibility in all directions and I know where all the other traffic is and I've looked behind me and I can see the road surface on both sides and I know where the cliff is and everything. Unless I've satisfied all of those points, I'm going to go straight ahead and I'm going to hit the animal. And a little cute possum ran out and I killed it. But we lived because my temptation when the possum comes out is to swerve, to miss it, because I don't want to hurt an animal. But I was on a steep mountain road and, you know, who knows if it was the right decision or not. But if I hadn't thought about it and planned in advance, I don't think I'd have done it. I would have taken the risk, I think. And my wife was in the car. I think it was the right thing to do. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was. Anyway, so the first thing is I think you should think ahead. The second thing is, with ethics, that you've got to forgive yourself and love yourself. So if you make the wrong decision, I think, don't get angry with yourself. Just pick yourself off the ground. None of us are perfect. And try again. And the third thing is seek help. So you're not alone. When you hit an ethical dilemma or conundrum, you have sitting around you now some of the nicest, smartest people in the world. They're going to be your peers for the rest of your life. All former CSE graduates, if you go up to them and say, I'm from CSE, and they know you're from CSE, you're welcome to the club. If you go to Silicon Valley, there's a huge CSE group there. They'll welcome you with open arms and help you settle in and do all sorts of stuff. You are now all part of a bigger thing, and if you hit a problem, then I strongly advise you to go to someone you admire and ask for their thoughts and help. And in fact, ask as many people as you can. Ask your parents if you admire them and are able to. Ask colleagues. Just ask and ask and ask. Don't ever feel you have to deal with it on yourself, and don't feel ashamed for being in an ethical dilemma. And I think that's all I have to say about ethics. Are there any questions about ethics? I didn't really help you at all, did I? It really is still your problem, but I guess I'm trying to encourage you that it is a problem worth thinking about carefully, and I have full confidence in your ability to solve the problem, provided you approach it in a wise way rather than an instinctive, emotional and gut reaction way. And the last thing to talk about is professionalism. And what do we mean by professionalism? Does anyone want to tell me, have a guess, what do you reckon a professional is? Who's a professional? Yeah, shoot. Integrity. Integrity? Someone with integrity? Professional. What careers are professionals? Yep.
Anyone who does something or technically
something that
someone who chooses to do something.
Yeah, someone who chooses to do something. You're thinking like the sporting sort of definition in a way. An amateur versus a professional. Yeah. That's right. The word in English means so many different things in so many different contexts. So here's what I mean when I talk about professionalism. For me, a professional is someone who belongs to a profession and doesn't just have a duty to their boss, but has a duty to the profession. So a doctor is a professional because if the doctor is working for a hospital and the hospital says do this or that and it's shonky, a doctor who's taken the Hippocratic Oath and is a professional, if they think that's not in the patient's interest, They will actually stand up to their boss and say, no, we can't do that. That's not right. I have a duty to the patient. An engineer is a professional. When I'm driving along the road and I drive over a bridge, I never even think twice about the risk I'm taking by driving over the bridge, because I know it was built by a civil engineer. And a civil engineer is a professional. And no matter how much the person that built the bridge wanted to cut corners and use cheap equipment and use shonky welds and not properly test the thing and use second-hand materials, no matter how much they wanted to do all that, a civil engineer would not sign off on it. Even though a civil engineer is paid by that person to sign off on it, so it is in the interests of the civil engineer to sign off everything that passes in front of them and do as little work as possible on it. A civil engineer has a duty to the profession, to civil engineers, which translates to a duty to society, to do the right thing. So a civil engineer will say to their boss, I'm sorry, I hear what you're saying, but I cannot sign off on that. It's not right. It needs to, if it's 15 mil bolts on the spec, there's got to be 15 mil bolts on the bridge. And if you put 14 mil bolts on it, I can't sign off on it. So that is, for me, what it is to be a professional. You have multiple duties. You always have a duty to yourself. You always have a duty to your employer. A professional also has a duty to the profession. So the dilemma for us all in computing is computing a profession? Until now, it hasn't really been a profession. So anyone can set up in their garage, self-teach themselves how to write VB or use Dreamweaver or some sort of web app, buildy thingy, write stuff and deploy it and set up a shopping cart system for some small sole trader or something like that. Anyone can do it. It's not like anyone can be a doctor. To go and be a doctor, they've got to pass all these tests and been ethically trained and been mentored by other doctors and been supervised and scrutinized. But anyone can write programs. Anyone can be a programmer. And what do we sort of know about programs? Well, we know they fail all the time. We know most, I don't know if Andrew's mentioned this, most software projects fail. So most time a company goes out and says, we're doing this $10 million software project. More often than not, it fails. And they might as well have taken that $10 million and flushed it down the toilet. The software on your phone fails and is constantly being patched because it's failed yet again this week, like it did last week. And the software in Internet of Things devices, which is pushed out really quickly, fails. The software in planes fails. The software in your burglar alarm fails. Software just fails all the time. In fact, we even say, oh, it's got a bug, is our cute way of saying it. Because what we don't want to say is, oh, it's stuffed again. Oh, I've made a mistake again. We say, I've made a bug. Software, in fact, the world now sort of expects software to fail. And I think that's really our failing. We should be a profession. We should have quality control. We should make sure that the software rewrite is fit for purpose. We shouldn't, when someone's pushing us for a tight deadline, cut corners and write shonky code. But we do. And you have no say. If your boss says do it, you say do it. Not like the doctor's boss who can say no, back off. They go, actually get this out now, it's good enough, ship it. Didn't pass all the tests, we'll patch it next week. You can't say no, back off. I own a duty to computing, da-da-da. I can't ship it. You say yeah. So it is actually a real dilemma for me that computing has this. And I think it's holding us back. And I think that all the failing software is just a waste of society's assets and values. And it's just a tragedy. It's worse pollution than all the plastic we throw out. Just all that wasted time and effort that could have been put to solving real problems. So shonky code is a problem. So when you go out, I hope you're going to be professionals. I don't know if you're ever going to be able to say no to your boss. I hope you can. But I hope you're going to be a professional, realize you have a duty to the profession, and you're going to try and support each other like I was talking about with ethics. You're going to try and connect to other computing people. When you're in dilemmas, you're going to talk to each other. You're going to try and create standards. You're going to try and work together. So one day, you cannot be a computer programmer in the same way you cannot be an engineer or a doctor or an architect or a solicitor or a lawyer or a patent attorney or a surveyor or all those other guys who've gotten into professions. One day will be a profession, and you can't just go and teach yourself some crap and then say, now I write programs, because someone will say, but where's your professionalism certificate, man? Have you been certified by the AMA? And you go, no, I taught myself. Trust me, it's all good. So that's what I think about professionalism. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments about that? Yeah.
In the professional industry,
So self-taught versus going to uni. I don't even... Let me not be put in the position of saying that uni education makes you a professional. There are many shonky unis who teach people how to code by just giving them random exercises and telling them how go-to works and loops work and things like that, and assuming that you'll pick up by osmosis or some other magic method, you'll suddenly become a good designer. So, but self-taught used to be big in the old days, and lots of people in senior positions still are, and that's what makes it a bit difficult for the profession. But I think you couldn't really be self-taught and a serious software developer these days. You sort of could, but gee, it'd be hard. Andrew, just Google, how many are self-taughters and how many are uni grads? No idea. Yeah. So mainly uni taught. But can I say there's no reason you couldn't be self-taught and not a professional. And there's no reason that being to uni will make you a professional. Being a professional isn't something that someone gives to you. It's not something we ask the uni for and they hand to us. Being a professional is something we seize ourselves. We look at ourselves in our community and we say, we want to have standards, we want it to mean something, we want to be trusted, we want to be respected, we want to do a good job, and we set our own standards. There is someone called the Australian Computer Society that tries to do this, so their fees are very expensive. But when you're a student, their fees are dirt cheap, so maybe sign up and see if you can do something there. But yeah, being a professional that's our problem, it's no one else's problems. Unis are happy for us to be professionals or not. Yep.
Is there anything that specifically that UNSW CSE tries to do to really make it much easier for us as students to become that professional?
Oh, so the question was, does CSE do anything to help it become more like a professional?
Anything specific?
Everything specific? So I hope the answer to that question is yes. I hope everything we do is designed that way. CSE is, again, a group of cats. There's so many of us, you'll never even see all of us. And different people teach different courses at different times, and different things happen at different things. But we have a couple of philosophies that we follow. One is that everyone should be tested with prac stuff, so you shouldn't be able to just bluff your way through something. You should actually have skills. One is we should trust our students whenever possible, and you see we have our students tutoring students. We have students lecturing students, Andrew being a student. We have, I guess, a sense of respect and trust for each other, and we sort of empower you guys to take leadership roles. CSE has, we do things like I don't know if it's still true, so here's what I think is true. We require that all the first year programming courses, you do pair programming and you work with someone else and help someone else. Is that still true? Good. We require that all courses have group work assignments and that you're taught a little bit about how groups work before you're thrown into a group work assignment, and that the group work assignments aren't measured on the outcome you produce, but are measured on the process you went through. So good group work is rewarded. And we don't call it group work, we call it teamwork, because that's what we really believe. We believe in I guess we believe in quality code and we don't believe in doing shonky things. And I think that's true through most of the senior lecturers, most of the senior staff down. And I think that attitude is embodied in our students. And if you've had a student tutor who was tutoring you, who we selected, now I'm not involved with their selection anymore, so I don't know how good the selection was, but I assume if it's like the old days, most, if not all, the tutors are people we're proud of and we want you to be apprenticed to and to follow them. Oh, actually, that's not the case anymore, is it? There are some shonky ones. But most of the tutors, I think, are really excellent and I'm really proud of. We just do everything we can, ultimately, and talking to you about things like this and encouraging you to think about it. And we try and get you to reflect, and you probably hate reflecting. You probably just want to write assignments and code and never write words again. But, hey, hi guys. I just lost that train of thought. Oh yeah, we like you reflecting, so we probably asked you to, and I think Andrew did in this course, write reflective journals as you go in some way or other. because it's part of professional practice to reflect on what you do, and we all hate doing it. And although Andrew made you do it, he hates doing it himself, and I hate doing it myself. But you know, my daughter hates all the things that she does to make her better at playing a musical instrument, but she does them because she really wants to play the musical instrument. And you go to the gym, you have to overload your muscles or your muscles don't develop. You have to push yourself and do things that aren't easy to be good. So reflection is hard, but reflection, it contains the path to getting in better. So we just try. So they're all the things we try. And super quick, because I should finish.
If students want to, going back to professionalism before, if students want to take the initiative on anything in particular, do you have any recommendations?
Hey, were you talking the whole way through the course? Was she always talking? Oh man, you can't keep talking because it's very distracting for poor Andrew and me. It's like you're doing your exam and someone's standing next to you just whispering or walking around with squeaky shoes. I know you don't mean anything bad by it, but it just makes us think, or makes us feel like dirt, and makes us feel, oh, we're not important, and oh, what I'm saying is rubbish. Oh no. So just to be aware, but I know you didn't mean anything by it. And I can't even remember your question. Sorry, I keep losing it.
If students want to take the initiative on the professionalism thing,
Yes.
do you have any recommendations?
Oh, to become a professional, any recommendations?
And if they have initiative and want to apply their initiative, do you have any recommendations, like things outside the coursework?
So everything is outside coursework. All the important things at CSE are outside coursework. So sure, do the courses, but if you want to become a professional and have that sort of more mature approach to your coding, then form a coding group with some friends. Do a little startup, solve a project, like Brad Lodge did a couple of years ago. He got together with a couple of clever guys in Algos and they worked out ways of routing trucks around the city, and they used it to distribute food from restaurants that had spare food to homeless people that needed food. There was this sort of constraint orientation problem, and he won a worldwide IBM prize for that. And they just formed a group themselves and decided to do it. And I hear projects like that all the time. Another group of kids a couple of years ago got together and sent textbooks to Cambodia and did some way of training students in Cambodia about how to do computer science. And other people have started startups. There have been so many startups that have come out of CSE. Or just take something and pull it to bits or fiddle with a project. So yeah, absolutely. I think if you want to be a professional, then just challenge yourself to work with others, constantly reflect on your behaviour, and set your things outside of the course. Things in the course are nothing. I mean, do the courses, that's fine, but really what you benefit from uni, the extra projects you do. And probably my main piece of advice would be to find a mentor. That's how I always improve in my life. I find someone I admire, and I think, I want to be a bit more like them. And then I hang around them and I copy them and I steal their ideas and I run things past them. And just find mentors and find 50 mentors. Just seek to improve yourself. I think almost even just asking the question means you'll be able to answer it. It's really just noticing that that's a worthwhile thing to aim for. That's really the last thing I had to say, and I went a bit over, so I'm sorry about that. I did say, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. We are actually going, every year we use tutors, we use students to be the tutors for the next year, as much as we can, because we find you guys do a much better job at teaching than we do. So if you're at all interested in that, we will actually be running over next year, and probably starting in a week, a training course to teach people how to teach, if you do want to do that. And I'll be doing that with Andrew will be involved as well, and lots of other inspirational people, former inspirational tutors. So if you're interested in ever being a tutor, and I reckon you should, I reckon the first step in learning something is learning it, and the second step in learning is teaching it to someone else. That's how you really learn something. Then please apply to be a tutor, and please apply to do this course, and we'll train you to be awesome tutors, and you will have so much fun. Who's a tutor here? Curtis, fun? What, yes? And is it fun to be a tutor? Yes? Jashank, is it fun? Who else is a tutor? Alex, fun? Yes? Fun? It's fantastic. Yeah. It is the best thing you can do. So if you wanted to apply to be a tutor, CSE has a whole lot of mechanisms, but here's one thing you've got to do. Please write this down or make a mental note of it. An email address, firstyear@unsw.edu.au. If you could just send a mail to that, and that'll go to me, and say, hi, my name is Sarah Bloggs. I take computing 1511. I'm interested in taking the tutor course and learning how to be a tutor in the future. That's all you need to do, and then you'll get on my list, and we'll mail you and arrange it all over. Are there any questions about anything at all? And that email address was firstyear@unsw.edu. Who's vaguely interested in being a tutor? Yes, some. You don't have to be the highest scoring student in the course, you just have to be interested in computing. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Andrew. Is that good?
No, that was horrible, Richard.
No. Do you need me to hang around now?
If you want to.
I do want to, but I also have a meeting that started 15 minutes ago.
Cool.
Yeah. Can I just, I won't be here to see you when you get your prizes. Can I just applaud you now? Congratulations, everyone who gets a prize. Congratulations, everyone who doesn't get a prize, but faced a personal obstacle and overcame it. Be awesome, and I hope you all help other people and become tutors in the future. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks. Oh, yes, thank you, Richard. I had some things written down to say, but it mostly comes out. Cool. Stealing your notes back. Cool, yes, thank you very much, Richard. And thank you for being 15 minutes late to your lecture. You would have gotten that last little bump out of it. So, we're going to have a break, but before we have a break, we're going to... And the slides are broken, and I apologize. They will be unbroken soon. But I'll just zoom down. So I've got a big click here button to start the AI tournament. I have to log in first, though. Does anyone know how to log into Spots? Slash? Okay, are you ready for me to push the button and hope that it works? Has everybody submitted your AIs and they're good and you're going to win? Okay, start the round. Coders, do I just hit start round again? No, it started, that's it. There we go, it's started now. So, let's take a break. Timer for 5 minutes, please. Let's do 5 minutes. I've just got to get all the slides and stuff fixed up here. If you have questions, the tutors will help you.